Okay guys, so like that video showed us earlier, context is really important for verses, for whole passages, for even whole books of the Bible to know their context. So in the video, they showed how the story of Gideon is oftentimes taken out of context if you don't read the whole story. Well, right now, Gavin and I are gonna go to a different passage in the New Testament and kind of show you how there's one verse that oftentimes people take out of context, and then we're gonna show you what it really means in its context. So, Gavin, if you wouldn't mind, let's read Philippians chapter 4, just verse 13 first, just verse 13.
All right. I can do all this through him who gives me strength.
Yeah, and some Bible translations say, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength, same thing. So that's, read that, you can kind of hear that and go, oh, okay, I think I know what that means. I can do all things through Christ, or I can do all this through him. Now, Gavin, if you wouldn't mind, let's go back to verse 10 and let's read all the way through verse 14.
Okay.
How about that?
I rejoiced greatly in the Lord that at last you renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. I'm not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. Yet it was good of you to share in my troubles.
Yeah, so there's a lot in there, but it really does help us understand what verse 13 means. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. Last week we talked about how sometimes the biblical writers, the authors, would want you to ponder something, so they'd leave out details or be intentionally, slightly confusing so that you would really take your time reading it over and over to understand it. Well, sometimes when we're confused, it's not because we didn't stop and ponder or think about it. It's because we read it out of context, and it's the same with this. And so when you read it in its context, I've heard a lot of people, like you see, a guy at the gym and he's like about to lift a bunch of weight and he's like, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, I can do this. And it's like, yes, Jesus can give you the power to do anything, but that's not exactly what Paul is talking about in here. He's talking about like, hey, sometimes I've had plenty of food or plenty of stuff. Other times I've been poor and I hardly had anything. He's like, but I've learned the secret to being content regardless of my circumstances. And I can do this through Jesus who gives me strength. That's what he's saying. He's like, I don't know what you're going through in your life, but I know I've been through different stuff in my life. I've been rich, I've had plenty of stuff. I've been poor, and I've had hardly anything. Either way, he's saying I trust Jesus, and I can do it all through Jesus. When I have lots of stuff with Jesus, I can be generous to other people. And even with the little stuff, I can still live my life for Jesus and be generous. So Paul is saying, no matter what circumstance you find yourself in, maybe great circumstances, maybe tough circumstances. Either way, you can do all things through Christ. You can do this with Jesus by your side and with you. So that's why it's important to read the Bible in its context. And I just encourage you guys, as you read the Bible, I try to do this. Like, it's not easy to try to read a lot of the Bible in one day. Sometimes you just want to read a few verses. But try to read at least, a paragraph or a chapter. Or if you're really going for it, read like a small book of the Bible. That would be like amazing. Maybe the book of Jude. It's like one chapter. But it can be kind of confusing too. But whatever you read, just know that you gotta read more than just a little bit. You gotta read it in its context so you can understand what God is really trying to say to you, because God's word is powerful, but you gotta understand it correctly for that power to really move in your life the way God intended it. So it can be a little tricky sometimes, but that will help you to eliminate confusion when you're reading the Bible, is reading it in its context so that God can work through your life even more powerfully. So Gavin, can you attempt to summarize what I just said?
I don't know, because you said it really well, but it actually just reminded me of the book of Daniel, which is one of my favorite books of the Bible. And I love the lion's den story. It's incredible. God was with him in the lion's den. But if I just read that, I don't see Daniel's full life unless I read the whole book of Daniel, to where Daniel was faithful in the lion's den because he trusted God. But actually, if you keep reading farther and farther back, Daniel was actually really, really old when he was in the lion's den. But he was faithful throughout his entire life. Even when he was like a teenager, he was completely faithful to God. And if I didn't read the entire book of Daniel, I wouldn't realize how faithful of a guy Daniel was. It wasn't just the lion's den, it was all these other things that Daniel trusted God in that I wouldn't have understood unless I read the whole entire thing. So context is key. Like you can't just read. You can get a lot out of one verse. There's a lot of verses that can give you a lot of inspiration that God will speak through you. But even if you just read a paragraph, like you said, that opens up a whole nother world of what that verse may actually mean. And it gives you the whole bigger picture of God's story right in your grasp of the Bible. So make sure, if you can, try to read as much as you can. Like you said, not so you get tired and confused, but so you can truly understand the bigger picture that God is trying to tell you.
Yeah, that's great, man. Great summary. And guys, you're gonna talk more about this in your groups, okay? You're actually gonna go through some of this. And I want you guys to just remember, sometimes it might seem like a little confusing or a little too brainy as we're talking about all this, but the point is that you would learn this and take action and grow and be more like Jesus. So remember, God's word is powerful, and we'll see you guys next time.